have Kinsey.
Oh, you got her on speed dial?
Well, yeah, I think I need to.
Feel weird, my back's gonna be.
Usually, when we have a presenter, they kind of talk to the council,
They talk to you guys.
but because this is for citizens and it's a workshop, I would kind of
I'll try to.
focus that way, that direction.
What? Please. Yeah.
Or you can bring your chairs over and sit by us, and then you only have to look one direction.
Hey, actually, you want to borrow these ones?
Or
Yeah.
just talk to your one tomorrow.
Or there's that too.
Yeah.
Those were fine. If you're ready for me to start, just let me know. It is 6:01, but I don't know if you're waiting for anything, so.
I'm not sure if I have, it's, this part's up, but I'm not sure if it's the camera part is right.
I think once you start, it just does it, comes on.
And it said it was recording.
It'll go. Okay.
You know, we'll get a text, or if it's
Somebody
not
will let you
working,
know.
they'll let us
She
know.
absolutely will.
So, okay, well, thank you, Chief Golding, Aberdeen Fire Department. So at the request of Mayor Springer, as part of the ongoing kind of talks back and forth between the city of Aberdeen and city of Cosmopolis about the EMS agreement, and the need for Cosmopolis to have a public hearing, I'm coming down to present a fairly lengthy, I'll try to get through it fairly quickly, as quickly as I can, but there is a lot of information to cover as far as a public hearing goes in relationship to EMS rates, and specifically EMS utility rates. Not to jump ahead a little bit, but the RCW calls for special information to be presented as part of a EMS rate public hearing, rather than just what you might see in a standard public hearing that you have. So kind of what we're gonna go through is, I'm gonna go through some information based on our EMS utility, which the Cosmopolis rates are gonna be based off of. As part of that, we need to talk about our last cost of service study, review our EMS revenues, what our 26 budget looks like, rate changes for 2026 in Aberdeen, impacts of those rates to the services in Aberdeen, and just what does that mean for Cosmopolis and kind of the Cosmopolis EMS operations to kind of close the loop on there. So some basic information about the EMS utility in and of itself. So back in 2005, RCW codified the ability for cities to operate a EMS utility. Actually, Aberdeen and several cities had one prior to that, but it was found to be unconstitutional. So all the cities at that time had to disband their utilities. Back in 2004 and the 2005 session, that, like I said, our legislators went back and codified it and fixed the items with it. So we reestablished ours back in 2006. And the EMS utility is treated much like any other traditional utility you might think of: water, sewer, and stormwater. One thing we like to point out is the EMS ambulance utility rate is a rate or fee. It's not a tax. So it is treated as like a water fee, a sewer fee, something like that, a true utility. So these funds that are collected through the utility, their use is restricted, just like any other utility, for expenses related to that utility. So EMS funds can only be allocated. Well, let me rephrase that. It's a little different here. EMS funds fund EMS, but they can allocate some other operational things depending on what they are on a joint allocation rate, because of a shared use of that piece of equipment or personnel or something like that. So they pretty much stay in the EMS business, but although remembering that general fund can go anywhere. Those funds can be used across those lines and used to subsidize EMS operations. As far as who has EMS utilities in the state, just to point out that we are not the only one. There are several across the state. Here's a list of the known ones that we have that are out there. One thing I'd like to note is as you look at that list, the ones with an asterisk, they get additional funding also through an EMS levy that has been approved by their voters. So they've got a different revenue stream that comes in that helps to offset the cost of operating EMS. Aberdeen does not have an EMS levy. The closest example at home is Hoquiam runs an EMS utility and an EMS levy to help fund. Rates can vary across all of these. They are based a lot of different factors. Every city is a little different. One thing I would point out when you look at EMS levies and how much they can put into their EMS, assessed valuation is a big part of that. And where Aberdeen and generally the harbor doesn't have really robust assessed valuation levels, where you're dealing with, and my favorite one up here to talk about is Mercer Island. Very rich community, very high property value, so they're able to collect more on their levies. And when you look at and I don't know what it is, but if you look at their EMS utility rate, it's probably going to be pretty low because they're able to collect, much higher based on assessed valuation on that other side. So, again, we talked about the public hearing, and where the public hearing comes into play is when we change rates, is when the general fund obligation in the EMS fund decreases. And in Aberdeen, we've been subsidizing our EMS operations using general fund dollars for a good number of years. And as we go through this, you'll see where we've gone to this full cost recovery model to where we eliminated that subsidy. So that triggered the need for us to have a public hearing ourselves, which can put you guys in a very similar situation. Previous to this, we were in the neighborhood. The numbers will kind of fluctuate depending on which year and budget you look at, but almost $2.5 million per year out of general fund was going in to help operate our EMS side of things. And then where another issue comes in is just the cost allocation. I talked about briefly before where there's some things we can use EMS dollars to pay for and share costs. That rate was high as well. So that's where you see kind of that subsidy really come in, is that allocation rate changes. So previously those shared expenses were at a 42 EMS, 58 general fund. I'm sorry, 42 general and 58 EMS. Full cost recovery rate pushed that down to 18% of the general fund and 82% of EMS. So that's a big swing. And the biggest part of that really is our salaries. As you guys know, with any budget business, your salary, personnel costs tend to be your biggest thing, and able to allocate those differently really was a big chunk of that subsidy. So review of our cost of service study that we had. Again, this is required by RCW to have occasional cost of service studies. This is a third-party analysis. We used a company by the name of FCS Group. They are well-versed in EMS utilities. In fact, they've done all of the very few that we've done cost of service studies. They've done the two previous to this one. I know they've worked with Hoquiam on theirs for a couple of iterations of their utility rate and several other entities. So they're very versed in EMS utility rate setting. And when they go in is they do a full deep dive into the operations, the revenue, the finance side of it. They look at the fire department as a whole. And they take all that information and, like I say, put it into their blender and come out with, hey, these are what your rates should be based on how much your business really is EMS and how much of it is really fire or general fund allocated activity. So again, we had that done in 2024, into 23, going into first of 24. Those findings were presented to our council by FCS themselves in March 24. There was 2 separate workshops that we had outside of that in April and May of that same year to discuss it again. It was also presented to the City of Aberdeen's Utility Rate Advisory Committee. If you're not familiar with that, that's a citizen-driven committee that the city of Aberdeen commissioned to look at utility rates as a whole in this city. And the first one they tackled, of course, was EMS, because that was the one that was on the radar at the time. They're looking at all the other rates to kind of, utility by utility. This citizen-driven committee recommended to our city council on their presentation of after going through their stuff, full cost recovery model that you'll see here. So that's kind of a background of that. And just like to point out that for us is all of the rate models that was presented to us by the consultants does utilize EMS reserves. There is a small amount of EMS reserves that we have built up over the years, and it's grown a little higher than what it should be. So these rates that we've all talked about over the years, by the end of our rate cycle in the end of 28, our reserves in theory should be brought down to a 80 to 90 day operating budget level. To where auditors really like to see them. As you know, they don't like to have really huge revenues. They like to see it more down to that 80 to 90 day. So we're systematically using reserves to get to that point too. So when we looked at our emergency services utility, we're looking at $7.2 million, and that they divide that into demand cost and availability cost. And you see the numbers there, not quite $1 million for demand and $6.27 million for the availability side of it. I'm sorry, I had the wrong slide here. So $8.8 million total budget, and fire general fund stuff was $3.6 million. And the EMS was $5 million. So breaking up what our budget looked like, the different sources there. So of the 8.1 there, when you look at the full cost recovery model, you can see where that fire side goes down to 1.5 from that 3.6 million we had. And EMS would increase from that just over 5 million to 7.2 million. So that was the shift based on what it would look like, should look like based on full cost recovery. When you look at actually the allocation of the work that Aberdeen Fire does as a whole. And then again, breaking that down, that 7.24 million, they break that down into a demand cost and an availability cost. Demand cost is the actual demand of the service, and the availability is everything that goes into operating it outside of the actual demand of the end use, if that makes sense. The EMS utility fee by law speaks to the availability side of it and not the demand side. So taking that all in, they came up with some rate factors for us to consider, some rates going into the future. They had some factors in there for growth of the rate based off of just general inflation, labor costs, benefit costs, customer growth, and incident growth. These actually, I thought at the time, were fairly low, inflationary numbers. And the perfect example is in 24 into 25, we knew that the labor cost was going to go up 5%. And they gave us a 2% thought in 26 forward. Well, that is actually 5 each year. We know that. And benefit costs, I can't tell you what the increase was, but it's more than 3. It's doubled it. It's 10 or 12% benefit costs. And, those are things that are kind of out of our control there. So needing that net revenue of 5.35 million on the left here, the number of units, what the annual rate looks like, and then what a monthly rate would look like at 58.72 per utility. It's not per person, it's per utility. Again, I was based on what the 2024 rate should have been for that cost recovery model at that time. It is higher now because we're farther into, and you'll see the rate growth coming up. So, and, moving on there. So again, the allocation rates, I talked already a little bit about this, but, these are the different ones that they gave us, where we were at status quo with that 42-58 split. They gave us a partial cost recovery model, which it was a rate that was between full cost and status quo. Kind of a midpoint, you know, for a third option for our city council to consider at that time. And that was a 69-31 split, and then full cost recovery again, 18 and 82, which is what we did. And of course, you know, by changing these, this is where we get to play with that general fund subsidy, you know, where we're able to decrease it by shifting more to EMS where it truly belongs. Rate structure. So this is the full cost recovery rate model that we had developed by our consultants. As you can see in 2024, there's that 5872, which was in that previous slide. And that has each year would increase, and we're coming into this one kind of mid-rate structure. So that's why when we talk about the rate is, we're talking about it being 6754 now. That's because, you know, all those factors that they consider going in leading that increased rate. This is what the status quo would have looked like. And this was maintaining that give or take $2.5 million subsidy that the city was doing into the general fund. We would be looking at a rate of 36.32, you know, roughly half, you know, and the city's not, you know, ignoring the fact that that is a big jump. We understand it, but we'll illustrate kind of how we got to this point coming up. And just show you, this was that midpoint in the rate model. These numbers kind of started off in the middle of those two rates to give us that third option. But although with the math in the back end of it it was not a full 50% cost savings to the general fund, if you will, a reduction in the subsidy, it only resulted in about a 25% decrease in our general fund subsidy. Again, the RCW calls for these occasional rate studies, just so you guys are aware. In Cosmopolis, the general train of thought right now for us is every 5 years, we're going to be wanting to do a rate study in the city of Aberdeen. So our next one will be due in 28 for a new rate model to start in 2029 is our intent at this point. So, and these rates, again, by a third-party consultant that specializes in this, these just aren't ones we're making up. You know, these come from actual data that is justifiable and, you know, accurate rates based on, you know, third-party analysis. So I'll talk a little bit about our revenues. A lot of different revenue streams that the city has in its EMS side. And again, this is EMS only revenues. Again, it operates much like utility. So these revenues are things, they're monies that can only be spent on EMS or allocated expenses for EMS. We got the EMS availability fee that averages out over the last 5 years to be almost half of our EMS operating revenue. Billing, that's about 22%, and that billing comes from the patient transports that we have when we bill insurances and whatever we get from there, or patients make payments when that is something that we can do. That's 22%. GEMT, the Ground Emergency Medical Transport Program, that's 20%. That is a state program that helps fund us a little bit more so for Medicaid transports. I'll get into what Medicaid looks like. It's terrible as far as reimbursement goes, but this is a program that helps supplement those low reimbursement rates. Contracts for EMS service, that averages out to be about 5% historically of where we're at. And that's the contracts with, say, the city of Cosmopolis, Fire District 10, already those different entities that we provide services to. And then just the other bucket, just miscellaneous income is about 6% there. And we'll go through what each one of these are. So talking about the utility fee, again, monthly fees authorized through RCW there. rates are set by our council, and those cost of service studies are required. Although the city of Aberdeen, oh, thank you. The city of Aberdeen has had very infrequent cost analysis, cost of service studies over the years. We had that initial one in 2006. And at that point, they had, a rate that was in line with study findings at that point. Actually, the rate that they went with was just a tad higher than what they recommended. I don't know the background of that. That was way before my time worrying about this. So, but that's what they did in 2006. They did an update in 2010. I called for a rate increase. Again, they gave 3 options, very similar to what we did in this last study. But the council opted for no increase at that point. And in 2024, we had the 3 options. And initially, our city council opted for the status quo to continue the general fund subsidy at the time of our last rate study. And this gives you an idea here of what our rates have looked like since the inception of, as we know it, of our EMS rates. Started out $12.80 a month, and in 2025, $34.11. Now, this doesn't take into account the next big jump, which is that $67 one we're talking about now. But this is kind of the history of it leading up to it. As you can see, infrequent rate increases where there should have been. I could pull stuff and show you instances where department administration and city staff recommended an increase just based off of operations, and council said no, or did a smaller increase than what was requested, just for us to try to keep up with ongoing increasing costs. So really what you would like to see it as I'm sure you know, is you'd like to see more of a gradual rather than as your stair step method. And this is the overall revenues over the past 5 years. So they have slowly increased, but that's a combination of addition of more utility units and also the rate increases. We don't have a huge increase in utility units. We get a few here and there a year, but that does play into it a little bit as well. Ambulance billing. So again, this is when we're billing our patients out. So non-resident billing, which is where Cosmopolis comes in for you guys. There is a fee based on the level of care and transport that's provided. We bill the insurance where we can legally. And if a balance is not paid by that, then we bill the patient where we can. Just to make a note, we do have payment plans and a charity program available to people who have troubles paying their ambulance bills or need assistance there. So those are options that are available to us. Just so you know, these are just the different rates that we charge for the various different classifications of calls and such. Each call gets a base rate plus mileage. Non-resident tends to be a little higher with these. As far as if you were to take a look at these and compare these locally, we're kind of in the middle of the pack as far as Grace Harbor County goes. We're not at the top, but again, like I said, we're kind of more of a average cost within the county. And we've kind of done that by design. We didn't want to, get these too high. These also, if we were to increase our rates too high, it does have an adverse effect on the level of funding we get from that GEMT program I talked about. So we have to make sure we're kind of staying in a sweet spot, so to speak, for ourselves there. Talking about our ambulance billing is roughly 80%, give or take, ebbs and flows from year to year, but the patients we transfer are covered by Medicare and Medicaid, and those historically are not the best paying. And Medicaid is the least amount of reimbursement. Medicaid patients, we talk about billing a patient for a balance that's not paid by insurance. Medicaid, we cannot legally balance bill those patients. We have to accept what Medicaid gets us, and that's it. So this is an example here of and this is actually, I just randomly picked, had my EMS accounts billing person pull a random call that happen to be a Cosmopolis resident, just to give you an idea what it looks like for us. Is we billed an ALS charge of $1,350 and $120 worth of mileage. And you can see that for that $1,470, we got $200 back. That's 14% return, which is, just, I don't know how they expect leases to maintain that type of reimbursement, but that's the billing side of it that we're struggling with. We do have some concerns internally too about just the future of Medicare and Medicaid billing. Just different things you hear. Nothing's coming down the line at us right now, but just with things you hear, you wonder, are there going to be cuts into these programs, which could very well affect not only us, but every other fire department or medical provider in the area. So, and this gives you an idea too of just our overall returns and kind of what they look like. Is Medicare almost $1 million, but we got somewhere around 45 or some odd percent back on those. Medicaid, $500,000, but we got $99,000 back. So just gives you an idea of what we're looking at when we're billing out our patient. So, and these are the revenues over the years, last 5 years of what we've got. It does kind of ebb and flow, and a lot depends on our call volume at the time, number of transports, the insurances they have. So there's no scientific way to say it's going to be this year. We just kind of, again, ballpark it of what we're going to expect. So talk a little bit more about the GMT program. Again, that state program that helps provide supplemental payments for Medicaid transports. This is a program that is, there's versions of this throughout many states. There's 30 or 40 some odd states that have some form of this. It was established in 2018, was supposed to sunset in 2024, but was extended to 28. So fingers crossed that when we approach 28, that the state will decide to extend it, but only time will tell for that. This does require a lot of extensive reporting and data analysis. Again, we have a third-party vendor that does this specialty accounting for us to help show what our GMT reimbursements would be from year to year. Again, and raising our billing rates that we talked about in the previous set of revenue slides can affect and decrease your GMT reimbursement. So it's keeping it in that sweet spot. And talking to our consultant about this, he says we are kind of right where we want to be, and he wouldn't be messing with our billing rates. So that's why one of the things that comes up, well, why do we just charge more for billing? Well, yeah, it's kind of, well, then we can actually lose money on everything. So, and this is our GMT revenues. Again, it fluctuates and is based on Medicaid transports. So, and it just depends on the number of transports you have of Medicaid patients from year to year. So, and last couple of years, last 3 years, we've been just a little over $1 million in this revenue, which goes into, funding operations as well. Contract for services. So we provide EMS services, you guys know, not only to the city of Cosmopolis, but Fire District 10 and 15. We also have an agreement with Bigelow Drive Homeowners Association. They're just south of Aberdeen and kind of a no man's land, but they do have an agreement with us. And also out to Stafford Creek. We have a agreement with them to provide EMS services as well. They're structured all a little bit differently. Right now, District 10, 15, and Bigelow Drive is based off of an annual flat rate that we bill them for the services. And then Cosmopolis right now, of course, you guys, based on the type of operations we're doing here for you guys, and we'll get more into that later, you guys have a rate that's based off of what our utility rate is. And the Stafford Creek is a total different outlier. It's a state agreement. We don't have a lot of ability to really drive that contract, but I don't argue too much because it's actually a full pay. So you go back to that $1,700 ambulance bill, they'll pay $1,700. So, we just kind of live with that one. And these are just how the revenue for this has increased over the years for us. And really the big bump is Cosmopolis in this, honestly, is because of how the operations just shifted in the level of services that we're providing and shifting from the traditional flat rate to something based off of our utility rate with you guys. So that's where the increase really comes from. And then we got our miscellaneous revenue. This is just anything that's not otherwise categorized. So a little grant funding we get here and there. Interest, although the City Council of Aberdeen here a couple of years ago changed it to where all interest goes to the general fund, which is something they're able to do. So the interest out of EMS doesn't go back into EMS. We get some small donations will go in here. Just to mention, you'll see a big bump in this as we see the graph, and that was because of back in 20 through into 24 when it dried up, there was COVID funding came through. And we got not quite $1.4 million in COVID funding that kind of artificially bumped us through that period of time. And you can see those big spikes. So we generally do live more in the 20,000 at most, really is where we like to think we're going to be in our miscellaneous income. Again, those big bumps were CARES and ARPA type funding that part of that went into EMS. Talking about our revenues budget for 2026. So this is what we budgeted for this year. So GMT at 700, contract for services at 273, private sources. One of the contracts that we have a small contract kind of lives outside of that for some odd reason in the budget. So, but that's in there at 884. Our billing of 975, utility fee coming in at 5.9 million, and we have doing a very small little $3,000 miscellaneous for a total of $7.8 million for an overall EMS budget. When I budget the billing and GEMT dollars, I am very conservative there because not knowing it's so volatile, it can be that I'm not comfortable going up to say $1 million for billing, even though maybe we did that last couple of years because next the bottom falls out. So I think this next year you'll probably see me do a higher one because it's been more consistent. So and if we do have those instances where our revenues, go past our expectations, those go back into reserves for EMS. So they stay in the EMS utility. And again, going back to 2024 study, it identified that we did have a little bit of a reserve there, and we're using those to help keep the rates down. And if we do this rate study coming up, the next one in a couple of years, and we still do have some reserve funds there, we'll be doing the same thing, is taking those dollars and spreading out over the next 5-year cycle to help keep the rates as low as we can and use those systematically. It always comes up is, why don't you just use it all in the first year and, so you don't have any rate increase and then go forward? Well, then you have a rate that does flat, then a huge spike rather than a gradual. So we're wanting not to get into that huge spike that we're living in today because of, the infrequent rate increases that the city has done over the years. And this is the reserves projected throughout this rate cycle. We started out with $3.3 million, and the end of it will be at that $1.2 million reserve, which is again about a 80 or so day operation budget for the EMS side. A little bit more on our budget here. Again, subsidized by the general fund. Rate adjustments previously have not been adopted by our council when our studies have said they need to be, or even with administration. So again, full cost recovery in 2010, they had that their general fund dollars, no general fund dollars with a rate adjustment status quo. They were using at that point $265,000 in 2010 money. But they chose no adjustment at that point in that 2010 rate update. And that just continued. At that point, that was the snowball, I like to call it, that we were really starting to fall behind, and our general fund subsidy was increasing by not keeping up. Talk a little bit about the city in general. For us, our uncommitted general fund reserve balance right now in the city of Aberdeen is in the neighborhood of $4.8 million. And the continued use of general fund subsidies to help operate EMS will deplete these reserves the city itself has in general fund sometime in mid-28. And we would be out of reserves then. And that was the issue that Aberdeen had of really needing to increase our rates so we're not burning through all of these reserves on the general fund side. Looking at our budget in general, it's increased over time as with any budget. Several things, cost of business continues to rise for us. Staffing requirements that we might have, wages and benefits go up, supplies and equipment and operating that equipment goes up, as we all know. Having an asset replacement plan that we desperately needed in the city, but was never addressed in the past, and we do now. Deferred maintenance on facilities and equipment, was a big issue for us and still is. We're been really put behind an 8 ball in the city, for me and the fire department, for all of these things. And just a reminder that we are not immune to the same increases that you see at the gas pump, when you're buying something at Home Depot or whatever it might be. We're realizing those all across the board in all of our expenses as well. So having to try to keep up to maintain what it is we provide. Again, our budget was based off of the cost recovery model, on those eligible expenses with the 18 and 82 allocation split. But we just didn't have a status quo budget, so to speak. We still had major cuts to the fire and EMS budget. My public education budget, for example, is all but non-existent. I've got just a couple of things that I have earmarked that we will still do for that, but just general public education, we had to cut that. A lot of maintenance, equipment replacement, supplies of really tightening our belt, and the entire city did this throughout their budgets too. But these are just examples of just fire and EMS. So this is what the budget looks like, the overall numbers. I'm going to go through each one of you, but total budget of this, $2.2 million of it is general fund, and the 7.5 is EMS, for a total of just under 10 million to operate is what it's costing us. So rate changes again, in 2025, we're at 34.11, which was the old status quo, but going into 26, it's bumping up. It has bumped up to 67.54, and then the rate increases based on this rate model for the next 2 years. So 69.56 and up to 71.65, going into the next couple of years. And these were, as recommended by the cost of service studies, where we should be. Our utility rate advisory committee recommended these rates, and then our city council also went with them as well. So impacts on service delivery. So our service that we provide is based on a fire-based EMS model. And the big thing I like to talk about here is it's service-based and not profit-based. We're not in it to make money. We're in it really to break even is what we want to do. And any money that we get, we want to put back into it like we are with our reserves now. We're not beholden to shareholders that, they're looking for a profit on their investment or something like that. So it's, again, more service-based and providing the best level of service that we can within our means. So, current levels of service, again, EMS and general fund dollars, but again, has not been based on full cost recovery model for decades now for us. And, we like to kind of, I guess you could say, complain that, previous councils have kicked this can down the road, and we're the ones that have just had to rip the Band-Aid off and, address it to make it more, feasible for the city as a whole. This gives you an idea of our total delivery service demands. So 2025, we had a total of 6,113 calls. 79% of those, just over 4,800 is EMS. That's kind of a national standard. You're right in that 80% window is kind of where you figure it's fire and EMS split. So we're right there. Our average over the years, we averaged 6,200 calls a year. So we're a little below average last year, and we're actually tracking a little low this year. Fingers crossed that, it stays that way. And so just historically staying in that 80% EMS. With that being said, we like to point out too that, a call isn't just like one unit going out. Depending on the severity, complexity of that call, there's multiple units going out. So in 2025, as an example, is we may have only had, like I say, 6,113 calls, but that necessitated almost 8,700 different responses, from a unit. It could be a fire engine going to help a medic unit on a complex EMS call. It could be multiple. This does include fire, by the way. It could be multiple units going to a fire, or multiple units going to an EMS call. Some EMS calls that you might see 4 different rigs there based on what it is. The cardiac arrest being the prime example, to where you can see 3 or 4 vehicles there for that one patient, because those are so labor and manpower intensive incidents. So we running right about anywhere from a 30 to 40% increase when you talk about actual unit responses to calls. Overlapping calls is a big deal for us too. Is we are very busy for the size of our department. You take our workload and you compare it across the state, and we are historically towards the top of that metrics. And when I talk about workload, that is number of calls compared to your staffing. So our firefighters are very busy and provide a service to a lot of people. But through that, though, due to the high number of calls, there's times that we have multiple calls going out at the same time. And we're averaging over the years about a 53% rate of, if there's 1 call, there's probably 2 calls, or 3 calls, or 4 or 5 going on all at the same time. So that necessitates the drive for us to staff how we are. And we can make an argument that we need more staffing, as everybody would like to make that argument. But we can't just decrease expenses on that side, because we still have all of these demands that are being put on the service. So with approval of the rate, we were able to maintain our current operations. We didn't change how we operated, really. We weren't able to truly bolster our response model. It was just able to maintain a status quo operationally. Even though we still also had some budget cuts in there to help maintain the funding sources throughout the whole city. Again, we're full cost recovery for EMS, and just eliminated that ongoing bleeding of our general fund into EMS that needed to be addressed. If the rate was not to be improved, that subsidy would have had to continue, depleting our general fund reserves, putting the city, in a bad position at that point. And we'd have to really take a hard look at, reducing our service that we provide through the fire department, both fire and EMS, really. And is it, get to the point to where we can't provide service to anybody outside our borders, and we're just going to worry about ourselves. Was topics that come up of things we might have to look at. So, just drastically really changing how we do business. Fire EMS funding, 63% of it is personnel, and I can't go and cut personnel because it's protected through our collective bargaining agreement. So my staffing is my staffing. So they always will just let's do more with less. Well, you're asking a lot of your already stressed employees, and then also I have a roadblock that I'm unable to go down that route. And just other overreaching effects into other city services. if we continue to use general fund dollars in the city of Aberdeen to subsidize that EMS, at the expense of what else? You name the parks, public works, the street side of it, community development, the police department. All take hits through the years, and my general fund side does, but what are we not doing for the rest of the community? So talking more about operations here in the city of Cosmopolis. So a little bit of history of where we were at, and this will kind of mirror a lot of what we talked about in the workshop, but just to kind of, reiterate some of this is, we got a really good long history of providing services to the city of Cosmopolis, and we've had a really good relationship for years, going back decades, longer than I've been here. It's been a while. So since 2005, there has been a contract. I don't know what it was like before that, but we did have a contract for services starting as far back as we can find as 2005 with a flat annual fee. At that time, and I'm kind of saying pre-2022, Cosmopolis had a volunteer-based non-transport basic life support aid response. So with personnel who were either certified as EMTs or emergency medical responders, which is a step below EMTs, so they should come first responders. And they had a history of having a really good, robust response. I can tell you from a personal standpoint of my time on the ambulance as a young firefighter in Aberdeen, it was not uncommon for me to come to the city of Cosmopolis and have 4 or 5 of your volunteers standing there helping the patient, which was great for us at that time. But we did see a little bit of a decrease leading up to 2022. And that's just, that visual, we didn't have stats. That's just that anecdotally, we know we were starting to see a little bit of a decrease leading up to that. Aberdeen, what we provided at that time was advanced life support or a paramedic level response and a transport. And generally speaking, it was just a single unit. We would send an ambulance over and take care over from your fire department and then transport the patient to the hospital. Occasionally, if we needed, we would call for extra help from Aberdeen to come in, but back in these days, that was a fairly rare thing. We generally, like I said, had a pretty good, robust response locally. So 2022 to date, really what shifted things for our operations and looking at our contracts with the city of Cosmopolis from Aberdeen was when the volunteer department, I'm sorry, that's not supposed to be 2026, but in January of 22, yeah, 22, yeah. The volunteer fire department resigned. City of Aberdeen stepped in and covered all of the services for you guys for a period of time. Since then, we do understand the Cosmopolis Fire Department has been attempting to rebuild. And I can tell you from my standpoint is I do understand those challenges. I know it's not an easy feat, especially in this day and age. It is a large task that you're undertaking to get to that point. And it will take some time to get there. Challenges and certifications and retention and recruitment. Because you need to get people onboarded, get them the training they need to be able to go out and function, safely and appropriately for your agency. And then just the retention, keeping the people you have and getting more people to come in. And that is across the board, as I'm sure you guys are all aware, volunteerism across not just in fire service, but in general, is down and is very, people are struggling with that. So we understand. So looking at, again, what the response models and things have changed. So back in January 22, again, there was nothing. We did a full fire and EMS response for you guys. In February, that tweaked a little bit. There was no fee initially, but then we went for an agreement that we had with you guys to where at that time, Cosmopolis was paying 100% of our utility rates. And then we did a charge per response for fires to cover that. In October of 23, the fire side, we backed off of that. and that was working with Chief Halley at the time, Cosmopolis kind of started doing their own fire side again, but still we're not there with certifications and personnel on the EMS side. So we maintained that 100% utility rate at the time and did full response for EMS. When I say full response is we treat a Cosmopolis call like it's a call in Aberdeen for EMS. So if it needs those 4 vehicles I talked about, it's going to get those 4 vehicles. We're not going to hold anything back because it's in Cosmopolis. Fireside is just a mutual aid basis. So if the fireside needed assistance, they would call us to help and we would come in. In September of 24, we did a little bit of a tweak in it, working with Chief Halley at that time to where we limited our EMS response to certain things. And what we did was trying to do is get like lift assists and things of that nature that hopefully the fireside really could take care of. And we would limit some of our responses coming down. And with that, we kind of came up with this agreement of getting down to where we're at with this 80% of our EMS rate at the time. And of course, still no fire fees. So the fire response didn't change. Again, on those like lift assists and calls like that, we were initially standing by on those calls and would respond if needed. And there still his instances where we're still having to respond into cause and handle those calls because there's not a response from the Cosmopolis Fire Department. So where we're at today is the EMS agreement expired at the end of June. We haven't cut the cord, so to speak, since we're in July. I know we're working through this process and I'm okay with that, for this short little period of time. Again, we still have a very robust response from Aberdeen into EMS for EMS responses.
Yeah.
So give you an idea of what the response numbers look like. These were updated year to date through the end of June. Is overall number of EMS calls in Cosmopolis, 130 of those. Some level of response from Cosmopolis with at least one responder was 81 of those, so about 62%. But an adequate number of responders, which we believe is two people. And we're not even talking about what their certifications are at this point, but just 2 people to go on these responses. We're sitting at 41% now. Now, I will say that some level of response with one responder, those could be instances though that maybe we got canceled because Cosmopolis did respond to that call that maybe we didn't need to go to, but we don't know if it's a single responder, if it was the chief going by himself or if it was, somebody with him. So you kind of got credit for that because we don't know. So, but, the number of those, I'm thinking may not have had really a true adequate response. So of those 130 calls, 89 of them really should include us. When we start talking about those calls that we back off of and we lift assist and things of those that we should not really be responding on and that we don't respond to in our outlying districts, such as Wishkah and Arden. So 89 of those, one responder on 58% of them. Adequate response on those, we're looking at 28%. So really kind of not really there where we should be for the type of response that you should be having. Responses that you guys should handle on your own, 50 of them, we've had to come to 22% of those because either they're calling for help or no response at all. And just looking at lift assist calls in and of itself, there's been 28 just lift assist calls, and we're coming over for 25% of those. So, those are the stats of the numbers of what drives where the Aberdeen City Council's mind is at this point. So, we continue to provide that enhanced and robust response, and it's not just to provide the response and throw rigs out there, but it's it's for patient care, provider, and firefighter safety out there. So, really, what the city of Aberdeen stance is with this is we really want to see Cosmopolis have a more sustained, adequate response. And going back to conversations I've had with, previously with Nick Fowley and I think a little bit with Chief Coker too, is that that's to us what success looks like, is Cosmopolis rebuilding back to what they were prior to 2022 with a good, robust response. And, having people that are certified in the various disciplines, both, really we're talking about EMS, but fire and EMS kind of combined too. This number I know ebbs and flows, but I know at one point, just to throw out, I do know Cosmopolis has a number of volunteers on their books, but how many of them live in town? So they're not able to respond in a timely manner because they're out of the area. So, and again, that 5 is just kind of a number that was thrown out, a couple months ago in a discussion that could, like I said, ebb and flow, I'm sure. Again, looking for that adequate level of response with, sustained performance, thinking, to responders being adequate, and at least one of those being some sort of EMS certification. And that goes right in line with the City of Cosmopolis Fire Department's Department of Health EMS license as an aid vehicle of at least one person responding that is certified at least at the EMR or EMT level. So current rate that you guys are paying at the 80% of the old rate actually translate, just to give you an idea, is 42% of our current rate. So, that's kind of a driver too, is, it's a very low decrease rate of what you've been paying. And this, again, the stance of the Aberdeen City Council is based on the level of service that Aberdeen is providing with the enhanced and robust response to EMS calls in Cosmopolis is, a Cosmopolis resident, why should they be paying a substantially lower rate than an Aberdeen one for the very same type of response to that type of call? So they've came up with the stance of any contracts moving forward at this point would be at a rate of 100% of what our rate is in this next agreement. So again, these are the rates that we're talking about. We talked about earlier too, again, starting in July 1. And the contract proposal we have, I ran it through the end of our rate cycle. So we just have some stability moving forward for both sides of knowing what it's going to look like. And with that being said, though, that, as things happen in Cosmopolis, if they are able to, at the fire department, to show a sustained level of response and improvement, and we're able to maintain that, then I'm more than willing myself to have those discussions of revisiting what it looks like, from a rate structure. But we need to see more of that as we move forward. So with that being said, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is my presentation.
Thank you.
So I'll report you.
Right. So we're going to be moving into our council meeting very shortly. Our next presenter will be Tara Demford, our CPA, which will be doing a budget report presentation.
If you want my seat.
She does want your,
She's part of the council position.
yes.
Yeah. I see we're back to our normal clients.
Well, Chris already told me that's a good thing we're doing.
All right, we're back on.
Okay, good evening. It is July 15th. We are going to call this meeting to order.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council member, would you do roll call, please?
Mayor Linda Springer.
Here.
Councilman Kim Skinner, I'm here. Councilman Jeremy Nguyen is excused. He's out of state. Councilmember Justin Spargo. Here. Councilmember Steve Davis. Here. Councilmember Sue Darcy.
Here.
So that is the roll call.
So is there a motion to excuse Mr. Nguyen, who called last month to notify us that he would be out?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Next, we're moving on to approval of agenda. Is there a motion to approve agenda?
So
Make
moved, Council Darcy.
Second.
Discussion?
Kim Skinner. Councilman Skinner.
Where does the vote for the? Like to. Yep. Good, thank you.
So, was there any discussion on approval of agenda? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, next, approval of consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Aye, Councilman Skinner. Make motion to approve the consent agenda.
Council Darcy seconds that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Any discussion?
Discussion, thank you.
Yes, the timeliness. I realize everybody's busy, but to get, a 50-page email to try to review today, it's pretty hard to get through that information and be ready for a council meeting in the same day. So on that, it would be nice to have that information earlier.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All ayes have it. Moving on. Let's see what it is. I think we should start out with doing the budget.
No council comments.
Okay, council comments at this time.
Steve Davis, Councilmember Steve Davis, I would really like the council to consider for next meeting, bringing forward a policy and procedure committee. We've talked about it in the past. The attorney has even suggested it on a few occasions. And one of the issues is that things like when we receive our council packets, and those things, without a defined policy, it's hard to get things done in a timely manner. And so my suggestion is a policy and procedure committee that helps move some of those actions into policy form. And I didn't bring it up tonight as far as putting it on the agenda, but I'd like to put it on the agenda for next meeting.
So noted. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in. So, consent.
Committee reports.
Committee reports, auditing and finance.
I did go through the extensive pile of all of the vouchers for the last month, and they all looked in line. So, and Tara will be obviously talking more on that. So yes.
And I should have had Tara go first for her presentation. So why don't we go ahead and
Well, we can just get through all
for the
this.
committee reports?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Parks?
We'll do it before the mayor's report. That's
Okay.
usually a long one.
Okay.
I hope everyone's noticed the new playground that was installed recently at Lions Park at the beginning of town. It's a great improvement to the city. There was a work party recently at Highlands, so the crew went up there and they were able to get things looking fresh and clean for the summertime. And overall, the public works are just mowing grass and trying to keep up with things as things grow. So appreciate their hard work.
Thank you. Public Works.
Safe.
Oh, safety.
Yeah, we held a meeting last night. Very little that we had discussion about. We discussed a little bit of the traffic calming that we're working on, that Councilman Spargo and myself are working on. And then we had, who there last night? Chief Green. Oh, and Chief Green will, in his report, give what the first few months of these traffic signals out here, the speed signals out here have done. And the numbers are incredible. I thought there had to be some kind of an error in it when he talked the amount of cars that travel through Cosmopolis in the last 4 or 5 months. It is really something. But other than that, we've just moved forward with, like I said, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time tonight concentrating on just what I'm supposed to be doing, but the striping of the streets, getting that stuff identified, moving through that. And I'm going to pass this to Councilman Davis. Do you have any other thing you can remember from
The other
last
thing we
night?
discussed briefly was just with the new articles about that popped up around the Cosmos site and cleanup,
Thank you.
and a brief discussion on what's happening there, what the city's liability might be in case of a catastrophic event and things like that. And so it was just trying to get that out. The mayor has a report. She may give some tonight, but she also has some information that she'll pass along eventually.
So there'll be,
Public Works.
moving on, Public Works.
Yeah, we didn't have a meeting. Donnie was out sick, but he was like Councilmember Spargo passed on. He was helping, the Public Works was part of helping put the new playground equipment in, and then they are still just plugging along doing the summer work of weeding and mowing, and yeah, so that's kind of where they're at right now. There isn't, and then any potholes they will be doing. There's been a few more identified, so they will be going around with some coal patching too as well. So just trying to just keep the lawns mowed as they continue to grow. Yeah.
A question for public. Any word on, did they get the last tree out of the Mill Creek that came down? Do you know if they?
Do not know. I didn't hear from Donnie about that, dude. Yeah, so I'm not sure. Did you see it when you were mowing? Is it still there?
Well, when I
Yeah.
mowed, it was still there.
Okay, yeah, I think that's probably on the list, yeah, of getting taken care of.
All right, moving on to city official report. Clerk Treasurer Terrell will be doing the budget presentation, so there's no report there tonight. Chief Green, do you have a report?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor. So we have the first 2 quarters of this year's stats for you all. We've seen a slight increase of calls, but not an increase of reportable crimes, so that's a good thing. Many more animal and parking complaints. I think that's pretty consistent with your constituents understanding that that's something that's available at their service now. Our park enforcement officer only had to impound one of the 10 cars contacted. Everybody else is complying, so that's our goal, is to get them to move their cars and be in compliance rather than go the towing route. Councilman Skinner mentioned the radar signs, and we've got over 464,000 cars go past them in the last since April 4th, so that's pretty significant. About 2,300 a day going northbound, and then 2,900 a day coming southbound into the city. So that's the citizens coming home from work wherever they're at. That's quite amazing. I think that it's pretty consistent when you look at the numbers for every month. The average speed is 26.73, so you're doing a lot better than Aberdeen's doing, or Aberdeen, a little bit closer to the speed limit, if not 1 mile an hour over. So I think people coming into town are slowing down. That's a good thing. I still think some people think they're going to get a ticket if they're coming too fast, which is fine by me. That whatever slows them down, that's a good thing. Our VIPs, they did 145.5 hours last month. A big chunk of that is here in Kazi. I know they're out here several nights a week driving around all your streets. That's their goal every night, is to make sure they hit every street a couple of times. National Night Out is coming up here on August 4th, Tuesday night from 5:30 to 7:30. Ross Lamke is our contact person at APD. So if somebody wants to have one in their neighborhood, they're more than welcome to schedule that with us, and we'll have some representative combine others being more up on the park as well. And then lastly, we're in our final steps of our 37th final police officer gatherings. Hopefully that person will be finished and get started soon.
Great, thank you. Fire Chief Coker.
Yeah, good evening. So we've had a total of 178 calls for the year of 2026. We've had 33 calls for service this month. There is a breakdown of the report during first the different responses, total of 33. The only other thing that I have for report is we are sending 2 members to the Fire 2 Academy. That'll be coming up soon, so it's another step in their certification level. These both are double certed in fire and EMS, very dedicated and very excited to get this extra knowledge and be able to serve the community.
We appreciate that. Okay, thank you. So mine will be short. I know it normally isn't, but it will be very short. Just a reminder, we have Festival in the Park coming up August 23rd. That is a Sunday. And we are taking vendor applications. So if you know anyone. Also, I want to extend a special thank you to Chief Coker. He will be finishing his career as the fire chief here in Cosmopolis at the end of July, and we wish you well. And I know you are still going to be a volunteer, and we appreciate that. And then Mr. Davis, Councilman Davis, brought up the concern he has about Cosmo. We have been in regular, usually quarterly meetings with the chiefs, fire chief, police chief. They keep us appraised of everything that's going on over there. I expect that next month, EPA and Ecology will be coming out and doing a presentation. And so a lot of your questions will be answered, and I think help alleviate maybe some of the concerns that you're having at this time. So with that said, short and sweet, we'll have Tara Dunford do her budget presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Mayor Council. This is our mid-year budget presentation and kind of the kickoff to the 2027 budget presentation and process. So just as a reminder for the format here, I'm going to make this bigger in a second, but I want to go over the format of these reports again. They should look similar to what we've seen in the past. So we're always going to start with beginning fund balance, which means cash and investment. So actual cash on hand in each fund. Followed by total revenues, expenditures, and then the increase or decrease in fund balance, ending with the actual ending fund balance. Your reports for each fund are going to include 2025 actual, 2026 budget, and 2026 year to date. For the general fund, I've also included projections for 2026 because we have a few big ticket items included in the budget amendment. And I wanted to show you what the impact of those would be on the year-to-date budget. Again, those are just estimates, hence the title projected, but giving you an idea of where we hope to end the year. So starting with the top of this report in the revenue section, let me get maybe a little bit bigger here. Our beginning fund balance. We started 2025 with a fund balance of less than $11,000. This is reflective of the dire financial situation that Cosmopolis was in 2024, and we did everything we could to just keep the ship afloat in 2024. Started 2025 with a very, very low cash balance, almost nothing. Ended 2025 with a positive fund balance of $203,000. This is great. This was because of the mayor really penny pinching in every possible category. It does also include $123,000 of insurance proceeds that we didn't budget and we're spending in 2026. So this huge increase here isn't a real increase, if you will. The city is on the cash basis of accounting. We're required to report the receipts as revenue when received, and money out when spent. So the actual increase without the $123,000 would still be significant, and we'd have an increase in fund balance. It's just not as positive as this indicates when we factor in the cash basis of accounting. That variance is shown here to our 2026 budget. We budgeted a beginning fund balance of $64,000, not factoring in that insurance payment that was received, I believe December 23rd of 2025. So our actual beginning cash balance was significantly higher, again, due to that insurance payment. So just keep that in mind with cash balance, that number is kind of temporarily inflated by the insurance payment. We'll get down to where we're projecting to end the year. We're still in really good shape. It's just not quite as good as this might indicate just looking at the numbers on paper. On the revenue side, everything's tracking really well. So we are 50% of the year complete. We should be about 50% budget collected. Property tax is just over. I don't usually worry about property tax because you're going to get your full levied amount, with a few exceptions. Sales tax is on track to be a little bit above budget, which is great. The B&O and utility tax is running pretty high. This is actually partially due to a prior year correction. So the financial system is set up to allocate all of your utility tax to the street fund when the money comes in, and then a manual adjustment has to be done every month to distribute those taxes to the general fund and the equipment reserve funds. I believe the prior clerk treasurer maybe wasn't aware that she needed to do that, so it didn't happen from September onwards. Kenzie and I have corrected that now. It's reflected in the 2026 actual. So that's what's making this number here a little bit high in the general fund. You'll see the street fund is offset with a negative in 2026. There's no legal or compliance issue with that. The general fund can and does subsidize the street fund, so the flow of funds back and forth between those funds can cross years if they need to. It looks odd, but you don't have a compliance issue there at all. The big thing on the miscellaneous revenues is the insurance proceeds. So $123,000 was received in 2025 and then $69,000 in 2026. When we get to the expense side, we'll talk about that $192,000 going out needing a budget amendment. But just so you know, this is where the revenue numbers are coming in. So 2025 actual really high, including that 123. And then 2026 year to date, including the $69,000. Other miscellaneous revenues include sale of surplus items, police vehicles and such to Aberdeen Police Department. That's one-time money. We're not going to count on that going forward, but it does boost your budget and help your fund balance this year, which is great. We're actually in a place where we're going to end this year with a positive fund balance, which is really good news for the city. So it's the revenue side. On the expense side, again, we should be tracking about 50% so far. We're looking pretty good. Some categories are slightly over. This is mainly due to one-time expenses like your liability insurance. It's been paid in full already. I'm not seeing anything concerning on the expense side other than the museum capital outlay. So this is $192,000 that I mentioned on the revenue side. Insurance proceeds came in exactly equal to the capital outlay expense that went out for repairs. That was not budgeted. So we need to authorize via budget amendment the authority to spend that money, even though it is insurance proceeds. The budget is adopted at the fund level in total for expenses, so we do need to increase expenditures to factor this in. In the projections for 2026, I've put here, in the executive line, I've added in $36,500 for a part-time city administrator for 6 months, based on the mayor's request, to discuss that tonight at the council meeting and potentially bring on a city administrator. So it's just here, again, these are projections, they're estimates. It's not saying anything's a fact. They're simply estimates. You can see what the general fund budget would look like if you were to approve this, for informational purposes only. I put the full cost of this position in the general fund for the sake of discussion and example. It could be allocated to the utility funds, but knowing there's a potential to get rid of the utility funds, I wanted to show council that you truly can afford this position, even if it needs to live 100% in the general fund. The general fund budget is in really good shape. Thanks to the contracting out of the police department, that saved a substantial amount of money already, and we'll have even bigger savings next year. This year's actuals include a leave payout, some unemployment, some insurance that wasn't fully canceled out right away, and then some minor utilities and such at the police department. So we'll have all of those costs will be gone completely in 2027.
Hey, Tara.
Yes.
I have a question, sorry. We wanted to pay the proposed city administrator out of the utilities fund, a different fund. What's the kind of the standard? How do you document that? Like if they're doing, because we do that in some other cities where, we have somebody pull a little bit out of water and we have somebody pull out of general, depending on what to do. How do we document that?
I would include it in the cost allocation plan and allocate it based on percent of expenditures. So for admin positions such as that, that's the best way to do it. We're not going to expect a city administrator to track their time and say, because say they're sitting in this meeting, how do you allocate that?
So sort of you're blocking time. You're blocking sort of their duties, 30% to.
I would say a pro rata share of budget. So if the general fund has $1 million budget and the water fund has a $2 million budget and the sewer fund has a $2 million budget, then general fund would get their 20% and water and sewer would each get 40%.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's something we can certainly look at. The city does not have a formal cost allocation plan. That would be something nice to incorporate into the 2027 budget. It really wouldn't be necessary if you don't have utility funds. So that's why we've kind of held off on doing it. We are doing cost allocation. The admin costs or admin positions that the city currently has are allocated, but it's not done via a formal plan. So either way, the general fund budget would look even better if we were to allocate the city administrator position, but even with charging it completely to the general fund, the city would be in a really good shape. We're projecting an increase in fund balance of over $80,000 this year by the end of the year, which is really, really good. That factors in the insurance payment going out of $192,000, but we only got $69,000 in revenue. So this is a substantial increase. Our fund balance as a percent of expenses should be over 20% by year end, which is amazing considering we started about at zero. This is great. I mean, we're right in target. I recommend generally 20 to 25% is a healthy fund balance. So we're really close to being there, even with the city administrator position being added. So really good news on the general fund side. And could even start looking better next year. Now that will all depend on whether the city contracts or gets rid of its utilities and how staffing would look after that. Numbers will continue to change, but I think we're in a really strong financial state going forward to give some flexibility, and council will have some options as to how to structure the city going forward either way. Any questions on the general fund before we continue on? I won't go through the other funds in a ton of detail, but I wanted to provide every single fund the city has is provided in your packet for reference. And again, they're all formatted the same way. So we have beginning fund balance, meaning cash and investments, showing our 2025 actuals, 26 budget, and our June year-to-date actual. The equipment funds don't really have anything of interest other than the utility tax does look high in those funds. That's the reallocation I was talking about that didn't happen in 2025 for the last 5 months. We booked that entry in 26. So our utility revenue in 26 is looking quite a bit higher than 2025 due to that correction. We'll see the offset of that in the street fund in a moment. On the expense side, again, we authorize the budget at the fund level for expenditures in total. So we really want to be looking for variations where our expenses are significantly over 50%, which might tell us that we have a budget issue that needs to be addressed via budget amendment. And we're not seeing that in this fund. The equipment reserve fund looks very similar. This fund also gets a portion of the utility tax, also looks very high due to that one-time correction. Expenses right in line. We are at 92%. However, this is a one-time payment for the Springbrook software, accounting software. So it's already been paid in full for this year. So there shouldn't be any more expenses in this fund. The city does maintain a drug fund, which we should probably abandon. There's a whole $705 in there, and we don't have a police department anymore, so we could get rid of that in the 2027 budget. But presented there in interest of transparency. You do have an advanced payment cemetery fund. You are authorized to take monthly payments on lots and prepayment for services. Essentially, there's just over $8,000 in there, no activity, but again, just presenting it so you have all the information. Fund 012 is the Macrinco Park Operating Fund. So this fund is funded by the interest earned on the trust fund. You're not seeing any revenue here. Typically, the city's booked this adjustment annually. It just hasn't been made yet for this year. So that's why you don't see any revenue. That entry will be booked by the end of the year. On the expense side, we're only at 28% versus budget. So we're doing just fine in this fund. The street fund, this is the allocation issue that I mentioned with the utility tax. So we're seeing a negative here in 2026. 2025 was really high. It should have been about half that amount. Again, the allocation wasn't processed for the last 5 months of the year, corrected in 2026. So that's why we have this negative here. The street fund still is fine overall. The cash balance in the street fund is low, and my opinion should always be low. This fund is subsidized by the general fund, so I don't usually recommend maintaining any more cash than you need in this fund. Every year during the budget process, the allocation of property tax and utility tax between the general fund and the street fund is adjusted to balance the fund. So if it runs in the negative, the general fund subsidizes it. That is normal in all cities. The little bit of motor vehicle fuel tax you get is never going to be sufficient to run your street operations. You're not mandated to have this in a separate fund. It could be part of the general fund. Most cities do keep it separately. I think it makes sense to keep it separately so you can kind of really see the cost of the subsidy and the cost of the expenses separately, but you could roll it into the general fund if you wanted to. Fund 105 is another cemetery fund. Your code calls for half of the funds going into the perpetual care fund and half going into the maintenance and operation budget in the general fund. So half the fee revenue is going towards maintenance now, and half is being saved for maintaining the cemetery when all the plots are sold. So it's currently just under $80,000 in there. Fund 110 is the EMS fund. So you'll notice budget to actual is very low on both sides based on the discussion you just had. So not a whole lot more to say there. Revenues are higher than expenses, which is what we want. It's the bulk of the expenses are the pass through to Aberdeen. And then there's a tiny little amount of supplies purchased by the city, $1,700 so far this year. Fund 205 is the bond fund. I will get through this and then I'll stop for questions because I'm sure there may be questions on this one. The first confusion here with this fund is that it was set up improperly by the prior administration. So when you have bond proceeds and then you have a property tax levy to repay that debt, it should have been set up as two separate funds. So your original $3 million should have gone into a construction fund. And then when you started levying the property tax dollars to repay that debt, it should have been set up in a separate debt service fund. For whatever reason, the prior administration commingled it all into one fund, which makes this quite confusing. But where we're at now, to kind of refresh your memory from a presentation we did maybe about a year ago, the city got $3 million in bond proceeds, and the total cost of the City Hall project was about $3.4 million. So we were overspent $430,000. The how and the why and what happened, I don't know. I know the bond proceeds came in 2020, and then obviously the construction started much, much later. So who knew what, when, is out of the realm of what I do. I can only tell you the end result is that we overspent significantly. So last year we talked about this, and council approved a few things to solve part of this problem. So there were old bond funds that had balances, $50,000 in the 1997 fire bond fund, and then $88,000 in an LID bond fund. The city checked with bond counsel on both of these, and it is allowable to transfer this money to the general fund and then into this fund, which was what was done last year based on a budget amendment. Additionally, in 2025, the school permit fees were $50,000. One-time money wasn't budgeted, wasn't needed to pay for ongoing expenses. So council approved transferring that into this fund to solve part of the shortage. That leaves us with the remaining just under $243,000 in the negative. The proposal, and really the only option that council has, because you don't have a whole lot of money, is to use your real estate excise tax money. So I'm just going to flip to the next page just briefly, but we'll come back. You have currently actual at the end of June, almost $300,000 in that fund. As far as I can tell, the city's never spent the real estate excise tax money, probably because it requires a formal comprehensive plan, which I don't believe the city had. So that money has been accumulating, which is great. It is restricted by state law for certain capital improvements. It can be used for debt service on those allowable capital improvements. So now that a comp plan has been approved and the city administrative buildings are outlined in the comp plan, council can move forward with covering this remaining shortfall out of the real estate excise tax fund. Every year this fund is allowed to run in the negative. You will probably get an audit finding for it. It's just not allowable per se law to let funds run in the negative, especially to this extent year after year after year. So the solution is, it really is the only option. The general fund will have some money at the end of the year. You could transfer it from the general fund and run your general fund right back down to zero. I certainly wouldn't recommend doing that when you have this set aside money. I'd always recommend using restricted funds first. Funds that can only be used for certain purposes, and then leaving your unrestricted funds available that have more flexibility associated with them. So included in the budget amendment is a proposal to use the REIT money to solve this problem. Now, the bulk of the problem is the cost overruns associated with the construction. There's also this small line that says undercollected property taxes through 2025. What is that? That is the fact that the mill hasn't been paying property taxes for several years. So the levy associated with the mill property, we've been budgeting the actual levy amount, which in most scenarios is just fine. The collection rate tends to be something like 98, 99%. But because the mill is such a big taxpayer and they haven't paid for several years, their portion of the debt is quite significant and we're behind on that. That should come eventually. I will reach out to the county to see where they are in their collection process. Because I think we're approaching the window where they're supposed to start doing something about this. But in the meantime, we do have this shortfall related to that.
But doesn't that also include citizens too
It
that
does.
are in back arrears
It
themselves that have
does.
not paid?
Yep. It absolutely does.
Yeah, 'cause
It's not just the mill.
right.
That is
right.
correct.
I just want people to know that
Yes.
it's not just the mill, it is the city in general who are in arrears.
You're correct.
Right.
It just so happens that
They're the
for
big
the
chunk.
average taxpayer,
Yeah.
if you didn't pay your portion of the debt, it might be
Yeah.
$8 to $12
Right.
versus the mill.
Yeah, I'm just saying, in
Yes.
general, I
Yep.
wanted to know that the
That
mill
is-
is just not. by
That's
itself,
correct.
yeah.
Yes. That's absolutely a true statement. Yes, thank you. Any questions on this
How long
scenario?
did it take to develop the REIT fund to that amount?
It's been many, many years. I could find out when we started collecting REIT money, but you only collect like 2025, only $23,000. So it's been
Long
a
time.
substantial amount of time to build up to that balance. Yeah,
And this would really pay off the debt the city has at this point. as well.
correct.
Yeah.
And then the excess of it, so are we taking the whole amount or
No.
just what we need?
Just what we
to-
need.
So then it will just, the REIT will stay there in case there's some other emergency or something that comes up, then we can,
Well,
or does it just sit there?
it will sit there. So the refunds can't be used for an emergency per se unless it's emergency related to a specific capital improvement
Right,
process. So this is gonna leave you, we're saying 242. It's gonna leave you over $50,000 left in there. So you could use that if you wanted to do major street improvements, a park, another admin building,
Right.
something like that. State law is.
Probably don't need that.
Yeah, probably need
Get
improvements
there.
for admin building.
I'll second.
But I would recommend like let it sit and
Yeah,
accumulate
to
again.
build again,
And then when you have something that you really need,
Right.
as long as it's in your comp plan and
Right.
it meets the state law definitions, then you'd have this money. available.
On that fund, are we drawing interest?
Yes. Yeah, so all of these funds are drawing interest. That's a great question. Council did pass a resolution last year to allocate all of the interest to the general fund. That's allowed per state law, and that was a recommendation I made as part of a budget balancing when I started here and you had no cash in the general fund at all. That was one of the first moves we made because interest rates were over 4% at that time. The only exception to that is the Macraco Trust Fund. That one is legally restricted per the trust agreement, so that interest is maintained in that fund. State law does not, interestingly enough, does not require you to keep interest earned on the refund in the refund. There are very, very few exceptions to the rule that you can allocate interest to the general fund. It's kind of an interesting.
You'd mentioned the street fund and keeping a low balance in the
Yeah.
street fund. We could earmark a percentage of the REIT fund to go into the street fund every year. And my question around that is to gain traffic improvement funds. If we have matching funds, it gets us further up the scale.
You could use your REIT funds as a match as long as the projects meet the definition in the rules relating to real estate excise tax. Those are very specific. I don't know them off the top of my head. We'd have to look at a case by case on each project. The street ones are tricky. Sometimes they qualify, sometimes they don't. So we just have to look at the project. And we'll look really closely at the rules and make sure that it's an allowable use of REIT and the project's in the comp plan.
I was gonna say, it would
Yeah,
have to be in our
comp plan.
tip plan
Yes.
in the comp plan. which
As
we
well as say, like, you have to have both
Right.
uses.
Right.
Yes.
So we could, in the future, we could earmark a percentage of the REIT funds that we get to go into that street fund.
If it's for a specific valid project that's in the comp plan and meets the RCW restrictions, yes,
Good.
correct. Yeah, and looking at what the city needs, it seems that street projects would be potentially the best use of it. Obviously, that's a council decision. You all get to decide how you spend that money. But that might be the best way to go about it. There is a little exception, I think, in the rules where you can use this for some street maintenance stuff, but I think it's a pretty high hurdle to get there. But something we can look into for sure. Any other questions on the bond fund before we carry on? Water operating fund is next. This utility fund is actually looking pretty good. So we're at 49% received year to date, where we should be at 50. Water usage is going to be a little bit higher in the summer, so I'm not too concerned about that 1% variance. And then on the expense side, we're looking really good, only at 38%, even though we're at 50% of the year complete. Salaries and benefits are very low due to the position vacancies and just the commitment to keeping costs as low as possible citywide. So really good. We have an increase in fund balance, and we actually have a pretty healthy fund balance in this fund. Currently just under 200,000. So compared to expenses, that's pretty good. I always give you the caveat that this might look good in terms of operating, but if something bad were to happen on the capital side, $200,000 is probably not going to go too far. So, and that's the piece we don't know. Sewer fund. So this fund, we all know, is in kind of a mess. I'm not going to rehash the discussion and the presentation that we did last year on the sewer, but as a reminder, we're way behind on payments to Aberdeen, and the contract is currently expired with Aberdeen, and I know council is looking at alternatives to this very big problem. In the meantime, where we're at right now, we're looking at budget to actual. In the 2026 budget, we did not include any payments to Aberdeen in the budget. We didn't know what they would be, and the contract was up for negotiation. So we said we're just not going to include anything in the budget, and we'll deal with it via budget amendment when it comes to that time. Now we're at that time. The mayor, working with Aberdeen, elected to make a payment to Aberdeen just to show good faith that we're moving forward and we're trying to do the best that we can. So that was about $273,000, and we need to get that captured via budget amendment.
And I think
the money. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Cheryl. So I think that we are paid up because when we came in, we were three years behind. And so sewer actually is paid up to 2025. It is our capital improvement that we're in negotiations on.
Correct. Yes. Yes. So this payment is in the actuals. We're going to get it captured in budget amendment, and then we still have just over $200,000 left in the fund that's collected that could go towards the capital, the debt related to the capital. Or if you were to sell your sewer system and negotiate with Aberdeen that you got to keep this money, it would get transferred to the general fund under state law. So that would be a really good thing for the city. Stormwater is another utility fund. Very small fund. We're at 51% of revenues, 40% of expenses, which is great. And you have a huge fund balance here, huge fund balance relative to expenses. What storm drains cost if they fail, I have no idea, but I assume more than this. So it's good and bad. on the state of your infrastructure.
Winter's coming.
But at least you have something here, you're not at
Right,
zero, so that's good. The determining the state of your infrastructure, what your capital needs are is outside the scope of what I do, but looking at the numbers, you do have some money here, and revenue versus expense wise, you're good and your fund balance is increasing, so all positive points. Lastly, we have the Macarenco Trust Fund. So this fund had an original trust deposit of just over 320,000 legally. That is to remain intact, and then the interest is transferred to the Macarenco Trust operating fund. The prior administration did draw down this balance. That's why we had a balance less than the 320 at the beginning of 2025. They had taken interfund loans against it. There are still interfund loans being repaid, but we are at least now having a balance above the required balance. So we should be back in compliance with the intent of the trust agreement at this point. And again, this is the only fund that has interest allocated to it because it's a trust fund and that's required, legally required to be maintained separately. We cannot allocate this interest to the general fund. And that is it for the funds. I'm happy to take questions or comments, or if there's anything you'd like to see presented at our next budget presentation, I'm happy to put that together.
The only question I had was when dissolving the police department last year, did we ever do a budget amendment for the police department money?
No, we didn't. So that's a great question. You're not actually legally required to do a budget amendment to reduce expenditures. So the budget's adopted at the fund level. Your actuals are going to be significantly lower than budgeted, and that's okay. If you wanted to do a budget amendment to lower it, you could. Generally, I wouldn't recommend going through that administrative hassle when you don't have to do it.
Any other questions?
No comment. Thank you again. very
Again.
much.
Yeah, we,
Much appreciated. Make it understandable and don't sugarcoat anything. Tell us that there's money there, but it isn't yet enough. That's
it's
what we
better.
have to. That's what we have to understand. And I truly myself appreciate your presentations.
I do. And honestly, I know we've been pitching and working very hard, but honestly, without you giving us guidance and the numerous phone calls, can we do this? I want to thank you very, very much. It's greatly appreciated. Okay. So with that, we are going to move on to new business discussion, mid-year budget report, Tara. So item 2, 2026 budget amendment, first reading of ordinance, CPA, Tara Dunford.
Thank you, Mayor. So this should probably be pretty self-explanatory because we've hopefully covered most of it in the presentation. But the first item in the budget amendment is the $192,000 for museum capital improvements. Again, it was covered by insurance settlements. We received all of the funds, but we don't have budget authority in the budget to spend that money yet. We do have significant savings from the police department this year, but not enough to cover that. So we've needed to amend the budget to add that expenditure authority in. The general fund would go over budget if we didn't authorize a budget amendment at this point. The second item is the $243,000, just under $243,000, using real estate excise tax proceeds to cover the shortfall in the bond fund that we just discussed. The comp plan was authorized by council and the project's in there, so we are good to go from a legal perspective on moving the funds. The sewer fund, increasing intergovernmental service expense by $273,000 to reflect the partial payment made to Aberdeen. When I say partial payment, I mean we didn't pay the capital bill, so we do still owe Aberdeen money. It's a partial payment in that sense, but it is the operating portion of the bill that was paid. Again, we didn't include anything in the the 2026 budget because we didn't really know where we were headed at that point. The last thing is a change to the FTE schedule. So the position of police clerk is removed. We had left that position in the 2026 budget, not knowing whether it would be needed during the transition phase or not. Now that we're fully transitioned and that position is no longer needed, we can remove it. The FTE schedule is including a proposed part-time city administrator position. Again, we didn't reflect the dissolution of the police department in the 2026 budget. It wasn't finalized, until after the budget was finalized. We do have significant savings related to the police department. $58,000 year to date. Another $92,000 expected next year for a total annualized savings of about $150,000. That's a conservative estimate. There are the $92,000 difference is leave payouts, unemployment, insurance allocations, utilities associated with the police building and such, just the last payments related to the police department. Again, we're on the cash paid basis, so anything that came in 2026, even if it was related to 25, had to hit this year's budget. That will all be done and cleaned up and off the books by 2027. The annualized cost of a part-time city administrator, 24 hours a week, would be $75,000. If we have a mid-July start date, that would be $36,500 for this year. Again, I have it projected in the general fund just to show you kind of worst case scenario. If you were to disband your utilities, you'd still be able to afford that position out of the general fund. And then the remainder of your packet is the ordinance and the language that Chris has reviewed. And then we have the summary tables that the expenditure increases tied to the narrative. So the $192,000 is the museum, the $242,000 is REAP money. So an increase in real estate excise tax fund expenditures. It's going to be offset by revenue. And then $273,000 in the sewer fund. As an increase for the payment to Aberdeen. Then we have revenue increase, general funds, the $68,000 we received this year. The $242,000 is expenses on the side of the REAP fund and revenue in the bond fund. And then beginning fund balance, we're bumping up the general fund, beginning fund balance to reflect that $123,000 that wasn't included in the budget fund balance. These numbers all again tie back to the narrative. In the terms of ending fund balance, no impact on the general fund because it's revenues and expenses washing out. In REAP and the bond fund, it's moving from one to the other, and the sewer fund it is drawing down their fund balance because it's an expense not offset by revenues. And then the FTE schedule amended to remove the police clerk and add the proposed part-time city administrator position. Any questions on this? To clarify on this too, this is the first read. You cannot adopt it tonight, even if you really wanted to. It's a public hearing. So you'll have to see this again next month. And the public does have an opportunity to comment, and it requires public noticing ahead of time.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
That's okay. We've been at this a couple of years now, but I'm reading here in our new business discussion, this is a public or budget amendment, first reading of the ordinance of 1405. Do we need to recite this tonight? You
don't need to recite it.
Recite it.
It's just
okay.
It's the first presentation
of it. Okay.
We need to.
Okay. Thank you.
You can just by heading, you don't have to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Tara. And I know you have a long drive.
Do you want me to stay in case there's questions on anything else, or
if you don't,
I'm fine either way.
I don't think we're, council action
No
is
council
on-
action on
No
that.
council action on it.
Correct.
So, yeah, it's just the EMS and a hearing on something else, so, yeah.
Unless you just want to hang out.
Unless there's any, I guess maybe, public comments, I guess we could stay till public comments.
Can find.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's shortly, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. So item 3, we had a presentation by Chief Golding for Emergency Medical Service EMS. So is there any discussion from the council tonight that questions that you have for Chief Golding tonight?
I don't remember what he told us.
I know that's a kind
I've heard it a couple of
our
times.
third go around on this, so.
I don't have.
No, I don't have any
any
questions.
Well, I mean, the only questions I have really when it comes to a vote is, I sincerely appreciate Aberdeen's support with the fire department EMS over the years. And, but I do feel like Cosmopolis is actively participating and working towards, keeping this going. I realize it's not your decision. And your council's decided they want the citizens of Causey to pay the same rate, 100%. And I think we should stay at the 80% rate. The scope of work in the contract, there's a couple of things that I spoke to already. But one of them is the billing. Under 2.2, it says that if the billing isn't collected, it'll be billed to Cosmopolis. We've had a discussion about that. I think that should probably say to Cosmopolis citizen versus Cosmopolis, because that puts us in a whole billing clerk aspect of trying to bill for EMS services and things like that somebody might get. So in the contract, I'd mentioned it a couple other times. I still think it's something that should be looked at. And then the scope of work, it still is a fee for availability. There's no real guarantee that Aberdeen is going to come, depending on their workload and what they have available, because their first due is their city. And so Causey is the second. And we may get somebody from District 2 or Hoquiam or something else to cover that. But at the same time, through mutual aid agreements, but at the same time, it really is just that. And since it is that, I still think we should be at 80%.
Chief Golden, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, a couple things. So on the response is referencing Aberdeen, take care of Aberdeen first concept, if I understood you right, is we don't cherry pick the call, so to speak, based on their location. It's the order of the call. So when the call comes in, and if it's in Cosmopolis, we're going to send units to that call first.
If they're available.
If another call comes in Aberdeen, if we still have units available, we'll take care of that ourselves. It's not that we would not come to Cosmopolis because there was another call coming in. If there is an instance where a call comes in Cosmopolis, if we do not have resources, we will handle the mutual aid to make sure that you do get somebody. And that's the practice that we've done for as long as I can remember. On the billing question you had there is that has been a clause that's been in all of our contracts for going back as long as I've been reviewing them. And I can tell you past practice, we have never billed one of the districts or a city for a payment not made by a citizen, so to speak. So I've always kind of wondered about that clause, to be honest with you, but it's just been it's been carried over from contract to contract to contract. That I agree we could probably address that at some point. Sure.
And I do have to say, I see Aberdeen over here on our responses, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anything else? So I have one thing that you kind of finished at the end of your presentation. If Cosmopolis is able to get back on their feet and get their numbers increased, how would we get that rate lowered? Because, once the rate gets established, it's hard to get it to go back down.
Right. No, Brad, I understand your concern. So I don't have a great answer for how that process would work.
Yeah,
The only thing I can offer you is, I would go to bat for it.
gotcha.
Because again, going back, the conversations that I've been having is what does success look like? And success always has been Cosmopolis getting back to where they were before. And then being able to curtail back. And if we're able to curtail back, I feel we're able to then take a look at what we're doing last week and reduce that.
Gotcha. And I know, thank you for your time with Chief Coker, and I'm sorry to see you go. I'm happy to see you're still staying on. But as the numbers for our CAUSE firefighters, I am always hearing we're getting certifications and we're getting those guys sent out to go get, their certs. From his presentation, it doesn't look like those certs are coming to light at calls. The call numbers aren't really reflecting that.
That goes back to the volunteerism being down. We're getting the people that are trained, but it's trying to get coverage 24/7 with all volunteers is extremely hard.
Absolutely.
And we have a better response during the non-work hours, but it's hit and miss.
I remember those days.
A lot of the calls used to be me, and now I'm working further away
Gotcha.
and not as available, so our call volume for response for CAUSE has been down.
Do we not have guys over their stations as we once had in the past?
We do have the resident, we have one resident right now, but a lot of the calls are coming out when they're off shift. Because they're only on a 24/48 schedule.
Gotcha.
So they're not burnt out living there the whole time, so they do
100%.
stuff on their off days. But they also do work during their days.
And by a rough percent, how many of your volunteers are CAUSE residents? Do you have a rough number?
One lives in the city limits right now.
Gotcha. And you're still sitting about 15?
Yes, right around 15. We do have a handful that are just outside the border that come in.
Gotcha. So I guess my other question would be, I definitely am not with 100% match. At that instance, we might as well start looking at subsidizing the fire department and going full 100% Aberdeen. If we're going to pay 100% what an Aberdeen resident pays, why pay for something twice? That's just black and white thinking. I'm not trying to have any vengeance towards you, Chief Coker, and your department. I thank you for everything you guys do and will do in the future. But as the budget looks, that's a good chunk of money going to a fire department when we're now paying them 100% match of an Aberdeen resident. That just seems similar to our public works and our sewer. We have to pay for it twice to, get to use it. We pay for the Aberdeen service and we pay for our guys to service it. So, Tara, since you are still here, is there any way, since our funds are starting to improve, can the city somehow, I'm not sure the right word, but be able to use a small portion of that general fund to lower it to even 90%, not 100% match of that rate?
You could use your own funds to subsidize, yes. And that's what in fact Aberdeen did for many years until they increased the rate. I should point out that the EMS proposal is EMS only. So Aberdeen's EMS fee is per the rate study split out and separated from fire. So if that makes you feel better that you're not duplicate paying, you really are just paying for EMS.
Okay.
Aberdeen pays for its fire separately and it's not included in that EMS.
Gotcha. And if we did want to look at even subsidizing 5% of this rate, what would that entail? Is that something we could do later down the road? Is that something, I know they are wanting this, voted on sooner than later, but can we as a city try to assist our citizens with this rate in the future?
You could, two options. You could approve the contract with Aberdeen, not pass the rate on to citizens right away, and we could look at what their rates need to be to citizens, and then adopt the rate increase to citizens. I think the better option would be pass the rates on to citizens right away and then see if you could lower those rates based on how the budget looks.
I definitely agree with going with that second option, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to look at all options available for our community and still to get proper services for our citizens. especially since losing our police department earlier in this year. That's the last thing I want to discuss. But financially, we have to look at, the dollar signs of the future. So thank you for your guys' answers and your guys' time. That's all I had for this topic.
The EMS rate, this new rate went in effect July 1st.
Yeah.
So we are getting billed today, the 15th, for the new rate per our utility hookups. So that's already done. Kazi should look at what's equitable in our community. Is we have people that don't have utilities in town. And, so there is some things that we need to look at as that equitable policy needs to be brought up.
Any other discussion?
Well, and with that equitability, there are other things that I think the council could look at like how our EMS fees are distributed equally amongst businesses. Let's just say we have a business that has a high quantity of full-time people living there who aren't having to pay that EMS fee. So we are actually, and they're getting, I guess you would call it a lower rate, comparatively speaking, to the amount of people they have living there. So there's also that aspect that can be looked at as far as adjusting our EMS fees for businesses that have not been, looked at as, say, like a rate study done. We haven't had a rate study done, as far as our businesses. Are they equitable? Do they need to be a higher rate than what they already are? And do certain businesses need to have that looked at as being equitable to what they are encompassing within the city? And that too, I think could help alleviate some of that too, which it could offset what the citizens are having to pay. And so I think that's something that could also be looked at too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's all I have to.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So next, we're moving on to item number 4. Bill Cedar will be speaking to the public hearing on petition to vacate alley.
This resolution is just setting the date for the hearing. State statute requires the legislative authority, which is you guys, the council, to set a hearing date by resolution. And then at that hearing date, that's when I will present all the information as far as the vacation goes. But this resolution is just setting that hearing date.
Any questions?
So you need us to set a date for next month, or?
But I've got the date set next week, yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Next is item number 5. Council Member Darcy, will you speak to the C-Link franchise agreement?
Yeah, Councilmember Spargo last month had a few questions around the ceiling. So it happened to work out that we had a COG meeting the following day. So Mayor and I took advantage of the Mayor Westport was there. So we talked to him at off meeting, and we talked to him and asked him a bunch of questions around, because they've already completed theirs out there and it's been a year and the whole thing. He gave no implications that there was any problems with anything. They've had no problems with the subcontractors that did their work out there and everything. They've had smooth everything. They've literally had no problems. He couldn't say anything bad about the whole project at all. So he seems very happy with everything. So I just wanted to pass that on, that we did have a discussion about it.
Awesome.
And there were no red flags that came up whatsoever around the this whole C-Link thing at all. And our stretch is such a short stretch that, it's not ocean shores. We're not sand based, but he literally had nothing bad to say about any of the experience that Westport has had at all with the C-Link at all. So I just wanted to pass that on to let you know. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because I know you had some hesitation around that, and we're looking at needing maybe more time for the contract.
I just want to add something there. They're a working similar project right down the road by Andy's Automotive.
Yeah.
They installed a handhole, and they didn't talk to the city of Aberdeen, and their construction conflicted and it caused a huge problem that they had to come physically remove their handle. So it isn't a
I'm sure
perfect,
they'll learn
it
from
isn't a
that
perfect
mistake.
picture from just in sand,
Right.
but you know, it is
Yeah.
happening actually 4 blocks
Oh,
down
yeah.
the road, errors are being created.
Yeah,
So
I just wanted to let you know that we did talk to Westport.
they got a
they-
baseball field. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna say anything bad about them.
Yeah, yeah,
So-
so they didn't have any problems, yeah.
No.
I think we're looking at tonight moving forward with that C-Link contract tonight when we do action. So next, any other discussion? Okay, next, on item 6, I will be appointing tonight an interim city administrator for 24 hours a week at this time. Any discussion?
I just want to give my 2 cents worth. I know John Martin. I lived in Ocean Shores when he was council member, and then when Mayor Dingler passed away, he became the mayor and then also became voted mayor. So I know him. I know his wife. My wife sat on the same board with her on the Chamber of Commerce. They're both very into their communities, and John comes with about as much experience, which we really need, is in the business department that the city has lacked considerably, and I think is something that we need to really focus on moving forward, because in my mind, we are a business. And so, but he has been in the harbor 30 plus years. He sits on the commissioner at PUD right now. He's been administrators in other cities around. And so I just feel that he is going to be a massive input and a good asset for the city moving forward, for what the city needs to do to continue our finances being good that they are. And so, yeah, I just wanted to let my own personal opinion around him, because I know I've known him. So I just feel that he would bring a lot to the city, a lot of organization too. I think that we highly could use too. And obviously helping the mayor with her scheduling the stuff that she has going on too. So.
And so with that said, I do want to speak to it. So all of you know that we've been working without a city administrator, without a public work director, you have me. That's 50, 60 hours a week on a salary of $600 a month. The previous administration was paid well. We probably have close to a $500,000 that we didn't have to pay the last 2.5 years. Because we didn't fill those positions. We've been working very, very lean, as Tara can attest to that. And that's why we are we are doing as well as we can. To be quite honest, I am not going to continue working 50, 60 or more hours a week. We need to stabilize. That's been my goal since I came into office, is financial responsibility and stabilizing. The goal was to look at bringing in a clerk treasurer as a CFO. We tried 2 positions. What I realized is that's about finances. They do not have the background or credentials that is needed to run a city. I said in a meeting very publicly, Cosmopolis would never have a city administrator. I was wrong. We need a city administrator. So we are I looked at what a CFO, if we thought about moving that direction. So an example, Montesano has a CFO. Her salary is $189,000 a year. That is not with medical. So we're talking up to 140, 150,000. We are going to have a very experienced city administrator at $79,000 a year, 24 hours a week. And so in reality, no benefits. We are going to have the experience that the city needs. The realization of needing more experience, oversight in all city departments rather than just finance is the key reason I really shifted. And I really had hoped that we would have someone in place earlier on, but we didn't. And so as I appoint John Martin as our interim city administrator, he will be starting on Monday. And so, as I said, this will help the city support the budget moving forward and create the sustainability and efficiency that this city needs for this administration and the next administration going forward with this plan in place. The city does not need a full-time city administrator, I will say that. The city cannot really afford a CFO that really lacks that experience from a clerk treasurer position. And so I think this is a good move, and I welcome all of you to come in and say hello and meet him on Monday.
I fully support the city administrator position and have for quite a while. And so I appreciate the effort bringing them on board. When we have the discussion on the ordinance, it's kind of, can we bring them on in lieu of the ordinance being passed? Because that has to do with that salary.
I will defer to Chris, but my general recommendation to councils is that if you fully intend to pass that budget amendment, you've read it, you've heard it, you know you can afford the position, as long as you're all on the same page that you're going to adopt that budget amendment. Is it perfect? No, and I'd like Chris to speak to it. But if it's just a little bit delayed, generally speaking, my recommendation would be go for. Now, of course, if council majorly changes tack and you don't adopt that budget amendment next month, then technically you don't have authority to have that position.
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to do everything, but, you know, again, then we would have somebody working for the city that we wouldn't pay, which would then be a bigger, different issue.
And in reality, as I said, this needs to happen sooner than later. All of you know the hours that I put in here, and we need to stabilize this city, and I need a life outside of being here 50 and 60 hours a week.
I'll speak to that. Whether it's John Martin or it's someone else, a city administrator, part-time, full-time, is a necessity. I've seen for 2 years, this lady put in the hours, and she does not have a problem in letting you know that she puts in the hours. But I've seen the mental strain, the physical strain to all of the people that work and volunteer at this city as trying to make it day by day by day by day. I sit down with a couple of chiefs a couple of years ago when we first got here and said, what's a 5-year plan? We don't have a plan for next week, let alone 5 years from now. So if we can move forward at this point in time with an administrator that can come in, take some time, month, 6 weeks, whatever, to get a handle on where we're at and give us some direction and vision forward, I truly believe that is something that we definitely move forward with.
One option,
So I commend you.
one option might be to have a special meeting to be able to move the public meeting for the ordinance sooner, so that we can, basically you have to fund the position. And that's what this ordinance is about, is funding the position. So it's a technicality, but it's a real technicality. You got to be able to fund it to be able to appoint them.
You do actually have the funds. That's the interesting part. The money's there because you have so much savings.
I was just gonna say, we have the funds
You
technically,
really do have the
Right.
money. It's just adding it to the FTEs.
right, yeah.
Which a lot of cities completely miss having an FTE schedule in their budget, period. So, yes, you should follow the letter of law and do it, but it does get missed, and it does tend to be something that you get your hands slapped for, as long as you catch it up.
Right. So my understanding though, I can hire him as an interim at this point in time, and then Chris.
Yeah, you can hire them, but what Tara's saying is, you know, ideally, the budget would be approved today, which it can't be because we're timing wise. It's kind of doing it a little bit out of order, but we have somebody that if the money's there.
Yeah.
The council wants, it's a need. And, you know, I guess the scenario would be, between now and the next council meeting, the council decides they don't want this position, that'd be a discussion we would have. My legal recommendation, we would still pay the individual, but he's terminated.
Right.
At that point.
What's
I
the
would
time
recommend
period?
Termination, but my point would be is if that's the decision, then we would pay him and then sever the mayor would make the decision to sever the relationship.
To have this second reading of this amendment, how much time do we have? A week, 2 weeks, 10 days? To notify the citizens and set a meeting?
Is it 14 days, Tara?
I was going to ask you if it was 10.
Bill, but what do you think, Bill?
I think it's at least 14.
So, but we have the money that we could pay him the month that it takes to make it all happen and then pass it and then
The
move
worst
on.
thing that could
Yeah.
happen compliance wise
Right.
is if you bring on this position that's not authorized in your budget, and
Right.
you pay them for 1 month and then you don't pass the budget,
Right.
and then the auditors could come in and audit
Right.
and say you had an unauthorized position
Right.
on the payroll and they could give you an audit finding. There's
Right.
no penalty associated with
Right.
that. There's no nothing. It's
Yeah,
just saying
A finding,
you
yeah,
did bad.
right.
You didn't follow the correct policy. I think there are plenty of other things for the auditors to look at.
Alright, yeah. Yeah, and it does seem to be a consensus at this point with the council members that are here that we're all good with it, so it would be, I think, extraordinary for us to somehow lopsided vote that doesn't happen. Come when we have to do our deal, yeah. So-
And I know John is aware that it's an interim position at this point.
We're all interim, Mayor.
We're all,
You're right, you're
Some more
right.
than
We're all interim.
some more than others, some more than others. Let's move on.
Public comments?
Okay. Any,
I think there's.
public comments.
Did anybody sign up for public comments?
If you didn't, you can,
Think
about
life.
Alright,
All right,
so since
Alright.
it's only
we'll
Mary,
change the locks on the doors.
I saved my comment.
alright.
okay,
Okay, so now we can vote.
okay. So, on. So, new business council action, item 1, vote to approve the 2026-2028 EMS agreement.
I, Councilman Skinner, make a motion to pass the 26-28 emergency medical service agreement with the city of Aberdeen.
Is there a second?
Council Darcy will second that.
Any discussion?
As I spoke earlier, I definitely think we should try to look into something to assist our community and our citizens on this rate, so it is not a full 100% match. So with it possibly being voted to approve tonight, I do think we should look into other options down the road to lower that rate, even if it's by a few percent.
Yeah, I think if public safety would, can definitely work on, and maybe even with finance, we can sit down in meetings and see if there's something that we
See if
can't look
do
at.
anything for
Yeah.
our citizens.
Run it by
Rates
Tara.
are getting high and
Yeah. And
bills are
then,
getting even higher.
yeah, and then be able to run it through Terra and then crunch some numbers to see if that's possible, you know.
I have a question for Chief Golding. Commission or a council committee, who sits on the group that decides and
For the city of Aberdeen,
for the city of Aberdeen?
besides the rate.
That it decides how EMS is operating, what to do.
So the rate in of itself, is a full council vote on what that rate looks like. Public Safety Committee for us would be kind of really the driving force. It would come through that committee as far as, the contract proposal and rates. It also is kind of convoluted for us too, because of the utility rate advisory committee that we have that reviewed it and also gives a recommendation of and blessing, if you will, from their purview to the council as a whole. So it's a little convoluted, but that's kind of where they believe you come from.
I've brought this up before, but we are Cosmopolis. We're not that big, but we still are making up a percentage of what will be covered by your EMS. I would like to see if there isn't something along the way down the road that we can't get a representative on one of these committees, one of these councils, groups that your public, so however we can do it to come in and be able to hear, explain where we're at, and have some type of input onto just what goes
That's a
on.
great discussion for an account of a city administrator.
There you go. Okay, thank you. Yep.
In other words, I'm passing the buck.
No, I fully understand that. You see what I'm talking about. I would just like to be able to have an ear there to hear what's going on or how it was derived and then, I don't know, a voting member, but.
What truly drove this was the cost service study.
Oh, my
So
Lord.
that's the biggest portion of
Yeah.
that, so.
And we can have disagreements up here left and right. I'm not somebody that likes to see subsidized. Because at some point in time, just what's happened here, the subsidy's got to go away. And then it's going to be the big hit. I've always said I would rather see my dues increase 10 cents a year instead of $100 at the end of 5 years. You know, it just, we see how that works from federal on down. Let's pass it to somebody else. Let's push it to somebody else.
I think the key on this is to swallow the amount, approve the contract, but work very collectively and very diligently on getting our fire department, our EMS program up to par.
I agree.
That's the commitment that I think the council really needs to make to do that for the citizens. So could we try for the,
Call for question?
Okay. So,
Motion's been made and seconded.
I seconded it.
Call for the question means call the vote.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, the motion passes. Okay. Okay, moving on to item 2, approval to approve resolution 2026, public hearing on petition to vacate Alley Row.
so moved.
Second, please state your name when you do that.
Councilmember Davis.
Councilman Skinner, second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, so pass. Action item 3, vote to approve C-Link franchise agreement. Is there a motion?
Council Darcy moves to approve the C-Link franchise.
Is there a second?
Councilman Skinner, seconds.
Is there any discussion?
I just want to add one last thing. Fiber optics, it's a cheap line to install, but it's extremely expensive to repair. With that being installed through our infrastructure of our community, we're putting our citizens at a possible risk. If that line ever gets damaged by one of our citizens, it will bankrupt them. If they're a business, they will most likely go under. If they are a homeowner, they will go through an extensive amount of financial pain. So no matter the distance, it's an expensive line that is going to feed Thurston County. It has no impact to Causey residents, but just a risk to our residents. So that's all I have to add.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, the ayes have it, motion passes. Public comments at this time. I'm gonna open the floor. Mary. Okay, I'm hearing no public comments, moving on to council comments.
Well, nobody has anything. I guess I'll start.
Oh, okay.
All right. So as Councilman Skinner had mentioned, some traffic calming is gonna hopefully start to take place. The administration has, had the information passed on to them where hopefully we have one of the best grant writers in the side of the Pacific Northwest. Maybe she can find some, magic. Or we have a lot of amazing citizens that work with businesses for possible discounts or donations. I know every area needs a stop line, needs a crosswalk, needs repainted. We have made a list of some high impact areas that we are going to try to direct towards first. But overall, we will try to cover the whole community of Cosmopolis with improving crosswalks, installing new crosswalks in areas, and even refreshing stop lines, because even a stop line will get someone to stop before a kid runs out in the middle of the road. Speed limit, I know the mayor and I and Councilman Skinner have discussed possibly moving the speed limit around Highland Park in that neighborhood of Dundee, Bell, Franklin, the whole works. It's very limited sidewalks. 25 is very fast for that community. Even lowering it to 20 miles per hour would lower the chances and better off the odds for everyone in that neighborhood. I know that comes with some
That will need to come to council next.
to council and ordinance, some changes, but that is just something that has been discussed on this topic. I don't have it formally on the agenda for tonight, but I did want to bring it forward to the community to let them know that we are working on those things. That's all I have.
Okay.
And would you like to look at adding that to the next council meeting?
Yes, please. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, any other discussion tonight?
I'd like to talk about the city administrator for a moment. I again firmly support the administrator, and I intend to vote in a positive manner for the ordinance. And even though it's maybe a little wonky, I still think we should get him in here as soon as possible and get rolling. So I would take the hit from the auditor if there's some kind of an issue. I do support this, so.
Great, I want to tell the council, thank you. I think you know that we've looked at options and this, I think, is the best option moving forward.
Yeah, and John is really, he's a good guy and he's very intelligent, and so I think he's gonna be a great asset to Cosmo.
Move to adjourn. Council Davis, move to adjourn.
I'll second that, Council Darcy.
Time has ended.
Aye.
Aye. What time is it?
It is
8:32,
32.
council
Well, I
meeting.
just want to make that on the recording.
I said 8:32, council.
Yeah.